Sometimes you're not going to be the best player in every scenario, but it's about the ability to adapt in those situations that makes you better. So I'm a better player now thanks to you.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know I had this effect on you, or Danny McFanny did. Hey everybody, I've got the champion and my arch nemesis apparently in the game of gold who defeated me on both heads-up occasions and for the championship for what is it, $450,000 or something. Maria Ho, what's up?
What's
What's
up? Did I defeat you or did I defeat Danny McFanny though? I don't know.
You defeated one of my personas. Well, you also defeated me um after coming from a good sleep. And yeah, and you defeated one of my personas too. It's hard to defeat that, to defeat more than one version of me.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, like I kind of view things in kind of a crazy way. So I actually am like kind of happy with one because I think it's good. I at least think in theory it's good for women to participate more in poker because it shows like women can take on the best in the world in poker, and it's not only like a guy's game, even though actual 98% or 99% or whatever it is a bunch of dudes staring at each other in poker. So I thought that was cool. And I'm curious. This must have been basically. I looked up on Hendon Mom. You have a 500 something thousand dollar score. I don't know what percent, if it's 100% that you kept of that. But this must have been basically one of your biggest scores, I would think. No?
Yeah, it's definitely I think in my top 3 or 5 biggest scores. I mean, I think 5 or 6 other six-figure scores. I've never had a seven-figure score, so it's definitely up there. And so on that end, of course, winning was great from the financial perspective, but as you mentioned, I think from a bigger, macro perspective, I definitely feel like winning was good in the sense that yes, there was out of the 16 participants, only 4 of us were women. So I think it was nice in that sense, of course, to represent. But also the competition was tough, especially in the end, having to face you. So it's definitely something that I'm
Danny
very proud
McFanny, I
of.
think you mean.
Right, right. Danny.
Well, the four leaf clovers betrayed Danny, and they favored you. The luck favored you, as it turned out. Do you think it'll be positive for women to get more into poker? Do you think that's a possibility in the future?
For sure. I mean, actually, I got so many messages from people who watch the show with their significant other. And they were saying, the person that I'm with, whether it's my wife or my girlfriend, they never like poker and they never watch poker normally, but I got them into this show and they actually really enjoyed watching poker in this format. And then when they saw, you and Kaina and Olga and Nikita, they got really into it because there were women that they could be rooting for. So those were some of the messages that I got from some of the people that watched the show. So I feel like that's definitely a good sign that perhaps this show got more women interested in the game. And then, of course, seeing a woman win might also provide some extra motivation for them to feel like, okay, I could do it too. And maybe they'll take those next steps of, first they go from watching the show, maybe they'll go and play some poker now for the first time. So obviously that would be the ideal scenario, and it's something that I hope is continue to be encouraged, whether it's having more women be reflected in these types of competitions. I would love to see a competition where it's half women and half men, right? I think that would be pretty cool too, just to have equal number representation and then kind of see how well we all do. But yeah, I think it's just nice to be able to play with this idea of the fact that, of course, there's no real reason why women wouldn't be as good at poker as men. So, the more of us that get into the game, I think the more we'll be able to see more women succeed in general.
I think so too. Well, I guess I mean it would be pretty easy to tell if it has like a dramatic effect on what the demographic is after. If it's changed pretty wildly, it'd be pretty interesting to see that. I'm curious what your experience was like, or at least I'm thinking the audience is really curious, especially playing on teams in a game that's typically zero sum. It's kind of funny that in poker, everyone always gets along pretty well in spite of winning each other's money and all of that. But it must have been interesting. You played on a team with me, and you played on a team with Fedor. What was that like? I know that you guys actually felt like you're working on a team the entire time. Is it a bit funny to use teamwork in poker? Do you think
Yeah,
there's more room for more collaboration within the actual game?
definitely. I feel like it was really interesting to watch it back and to see how much I was rooting for my teammates, right? It's like usually in a situation, yeah, maybe your friend makes the final table and then you go to the final table and you're railing them and you're cheering. But in an actual game where you're also competing to root for other people in that aspect is so different from anything I think we've really experienced as poker players. And I didn't know that I would get that fired up for my teammates. That, when somebody took a bad beat or when there was a really crappy run out, I felt so emotionally invested as if this was happening to me, which is demonstrated by the fact that I cursed a lot, right? I cursed a lot when I was watching my teammates play. And when they would get a really bad river, I would be so mad and so upset. But when I'm playing, I'm really stoic, right? It was so weird to see that contrast of how I was rooting for my teammates. And yeah, I just honestly really enjoyed getting to know people better, right? Like, for example, you and me, or, me and Josh. Sure, we've played poker with each other, against each other, whatever you want to call it. But like, it's it hasn't been, there hasn't been that many opportunities where we've spent that kind of time together where we're essentially in a room for 10 or 12 hours. And you mentioned this in one of the interviews too, like we got to pick your brain a little bit, right? Like we got to pick Fedor's brain a little bit. And so it's not every day that you get that type of access to the best players in the world. It's not every day that you get to in real time hear their approach to certain strategies, and certain, elements of the game. So that was such a great experience for everybody, I think, to have that insight. And in turn, the viewers ended up getting that experience as well, right? So it was cool to just spend more time with people that I've known for so long, but I've never really gotten to know them off the table or away from the table. So I just really enjoyed that dynamic as a whole.
So, do you think there's more room for this to happen in actual tournaments, like in poker typically, or it's just like a production kind of thing that for typical TV shows?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I feel like, you've been around poker long enough. There were a couple of examples of which people had tried to maybe incorporate a team aspect into poker, right? We had like the Global Poker League, which I was actually a part of. We've had some people, maybe it was before their time, ahead of their time. And for some reason, it didn't really catch on. But I think it has to be formatted in a very specific way. I feel like in this situation, it was easier because, again, it was very produced, right? There was time to film everything and then have a lot of time to edit it. I don't know how that would translate if we try to do it in like a live real-time scenario, because it could feel a little chaotic. You wouldn't be able to hear what everybody's saying if you're following that many different teams. But I really hope that somebody is willing to take that challenge on. I definitely think it could be done. And I think that it could really be something that would be interesting for the players and the fans of the game as well. But it's just about doing it right. So I think somebody really needs to kind of, someone from a creative side, someone from a production side can probably figure out how we could do that more in real time versus in like a post edited produced show that our format was.
Yeah, I was thinking personally, like to get like I'll have to have a separate podcast where people come on and talk about this. So that's my personal idea. If someone else takes that idea, sure. Why not? We need more of that. I was thinking basically to combine like the businessmen and the pros more and get them to work together a little bit, at least for high stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a bit tricky as we've seen, but this was like one of the first shows that managed to do it, from what I could tell. which is interesting. But I think that way like, it wouldn't be such an isolating game, and more people could participate in ways that makes the community flourish a little bit more, rather than be like there can only be so many champions, right? And it's just hard for most people to get something out of something when everyone's like basically being squeezed. Oh, by the way, do you still have that hat I gave you?
Yo, Timmy. Maria,
You present me this?
I've got you this.
Thank you. Are you gonna be upset if I don't wear this? If I just.
Yes, I will.
You know what? I think maybe they lost it. I think maybe, in
They did.
transit between Korea and here, it got lost, but I appreciate it. But you know what? That wasn't the only gift you bought me. Like you bought me something else, which I never got. I feel like it was sunglasses and Yo ended up getting them. So really my question to you is where are the other gifts that you owe me?
I don't think that's how gifts work. I don't think gifts are owed. But I'll tell you what, I'll think of something else since apparently you didn't like the one. I thought it was really fit you though. Um but it's yeah, well I'll think of something else. I was gonna get you like a scarf or something. I feel like you're a scarf person.
I'll take it. Send it my way.
You don't sound that enthusiastic. I was trying to get a read. Okay, well, we learned that that Maria's not really a scarf person, so that's good. How did it compare to other poker shows that are other shows that you're on? Because I know you're on The Amazing Race,
Mhm.
and you've been involved with production and been in the spotlight a bit, more in the mainstream eye than most people, I think. Would you say this was a similar experience to that, or would you say the show was just totally different?
Yeah, it's funny. I would say in some ways it was similar. Like, obviously, being on The Amazing Race, there was this element again of not knowing what to expect. And The Amazing Race was a show where, every morning we would wake up and we would have no idea what we would have to do, where we would have to go. So there was a little bit of this in Game of Gold as well, because, I think a lot of people have already talked about this, but they didn't really give us any information. They didn't really tell us what games we would be playing, how heavily it would focus on poker. We didn't know if the challenges would include any physical challenges as well. And we didn't even really know who else was going to be there, who we would be competing against. So, in that sense, that element of surprise and the anxiety that comes with maybe not knowing what is going to happen, that was very much a part of this experience as well. I would say The Amazing Race was a lot more physical though. On Amazing Race, we did physical challenges as well as mental challenges, whereas this ended up being primarily poker focused, or card game focused. So in that sense, I felt more comfortable doing this, right? Because it wasn't as out of my element, in the sense of like, at the end of the day, when we sit down at the poker table, even if all of the other factors are different, even if we're in a team dynamic or we're playing against somebody that we've never played against before, we still know the game of poker like the back of our hand, right? So in some senses, I felt comfortable here, but in some other senses, it was still very much that drama or that buildup of like not knowing what's going to happen next. But I think what I love the most, just going back to a question you already asked, is the thing I love the most about this show compared to other shows I've been on, compared to other poker streams that I've done, is just the team element. I think that made all of the difference. And also hearing what everybody had to say after the fact, about not only you, but other people. You don't really get to know what other people think about your game very often, right? It's like, sure, maybe somebody has you fish tagged online, but you don't ever get to see that. You don't ever know these things, but you get to finally hear it. To hear kind of what your peers think about the plays that you're making or your game in general. So that's always interesting. That definitely provides a little element of, drama, and it definitely probably caused some people to feel a little bit insecure about their game, to hear somebody who's very, very good at the game or someone who they respect maybe not speak so highly of them.
So, what did you hear? What was the feedback? Are you happy with how you played?
happy with how I played. I think that I've always been really open about my general strategy is I started playing poker before online was very popular, before the big online boom, before solvers came out. Like just there was so little information when I first started playing compared to the information and resources that's out there now. So I feel like I've always tried to straddle the line of like I was a live player first, but I've definitely tried to put in some work and study and try to keep up and evolve with the game. But I do love the human element. I love the psychological element of the game. I love the exploits that you can make in game that give you that extra little bit of edge. So I've always tried to balance those two, I've never claimed to be the most well-studied poker player, but I've definitely put in my time as well. Like I understand that those are elements to my game that will only enhance my play. So I think overall I am happy with the way I played. And as far as like what I heard people say, I feel like, at the end of the day, anything that was negative, I tried not to take it personally because I have to remember that people are watching it while they see the whole cards. And that already creates some type of like cognitive bias when they're judging somebody's play when they already know what their opponents have, right? Even I was guilty of that. And then also, I think overall it felt like what people said was usually positive, pretty accurate. There was nothing that I, felt really upset about by any means. And I also think I like to own the fact that this is every time I play poker, it's a learning experience, right? Playing you heads up in the end was, by far the toughest heads up match I've ever played in my life. Not that I've played that many, because as an MTT player, I don't specialize in heads up. So I have to get into a scenario where I am finally heads up with somebody for me to gain that experience. And so even though you played amazing and like I feel lucky to have gotten out of there alive, I took away so much playing against you heads up. And in the future, I'm going to be a better player when I get into that scenario because I played you, so I try not to have a big ego about it, right? Like I went in there feeling like we're super deep stacked. Jungle obviously has a huge edge here, but I feel really proud of the fact that I held my own, like for example, you were 3-betting me at such a high frequency that I knew that I needed to start calling wider in position against your 3-bets. I didn't want to be over folding to your 3-bets once I knew how often you were 3-betting. Like adjustments that I made to try to stay in the game, right? To try to hold my own against you. I felt like I was able to do that. So in that sense, I am proud. I'm never going to stand up here and say that I'm better at heads up than you or Danny McFanny, but I am super proud of the fact that I can go up against the best and hold my own. And sometimes that's all you could do, right? Sometimes you're not going to be the best player in every scenario, but it's about the ability to adapt in those situations that makes you better. So I'm a better player now, thanks to you.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know I had this effect on you, or Danny McFanny did. Yeah,
Who
Danny McFanny has a
knew?
way as is quite charming. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all the poker variants are quite complicated. And yeah, I mean, I think the people judging might forget that, doing something's a lot harder than spectating it. Let's just put it like that. I just find it so funny
For
when
sure.
people I personally find it really funny when people talk a lot of shit and don't actually do something. It's kind of a big pet peeve of mine. I want to ask, who was your favorite character on the show? Who did you get along with, or not get along with on the show? That's actually two questions, or
I
maybe
think
three.
that my favorite characters on the show, I would say, is Josh and you when you were awake. Like asleep, Jungle, not as entertaining. I think everybody could agree with that. But when Jungle is awake,
Sure.
he's pretty entertaining. But like I feel like when you were super fired up, like there was a point I think where things turned for you where you were like, "Oh yeah, like I'm in this competition. Like there's money to be won. Like and you
Oh yeah.
started getting really into the game. I think in the beginning you weren't that into it because I don't think you really knew what you got yourself into, and you're like, okay, what am I kind of doing here? But then I think later on you really got into it, and I think that's when people really got to see the fun character that you turn on in those situations. And Josh was just great because I think Josh was really honest, really authentic. And I think Josh is just one of those people that's very comfortable with who he is. And those are always the best people to watch, And special shout out to Kaina for just being really real and relatable. And I think we always need somebody on that show who's kind of willing to just put themselves out there and not be afraid of being judged. As far as anybody I didn't get along with, I don't feel like I did. I feel like I got along with everyone, to be honest, because, there were quite a few people I didn't spend any time with, right? For example, Charlie, David, Andy, Olga, Nikita, like, we were never on the same team. So I almost never spoke to them during the filming of the show. So it's hard to say that I didn't get along with anybody because I didn't really spend that much time with half of the people. And then the other half of the people that I did spend time with, I thought we got along really well. So
Yeah, I figured. Very healthy. It's hard for healthy people to get into disagreements, although it's more entertaining to watch or to investigate. Yeah, most of the people on the show don't really get into disagreements. I'm like a bit more combative. So I might occasionally, it's pretty rare actually. Um, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, I mean, speaking of kinda, actually there was a hand that you played against her. I'm curious of your thought process of this hand. And this will be so there was it was you were playing her heads up and you like raised the flop in a 3-bet pot. Do you remember this hand? And then you
yeah, with
bet the
Queen 8
turn
when she
with
had
like
Ace King.
yeah, something like that. She had like ace king high and you had like a gut shot. I'm curious what made you decide to barrel the turn? Is this just a Maria Ho bluff or what? I was that hand got my attention. I was like that was why I was falling asleep. Everything was so boring. And then that hand I was like, "What?" Okay. That was kind of what happened. Like when I see something unorthodox, it like really lights me up. But most of the time I just see boring ass shit. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. But yeah, what happened there?
I mean, I think I have to start with just the fact that, kind of made it very clear to everybody that she was a little less experienced than some of the other players, and that maybe she felt a little bit overwhelmed by the pressure of that situation. And so I already knew that when I would play heads up against her that I would be calling, wider pre when I was in position against her, because I felt like I have more experience post and I felt really comfortable post. So I was just going to take a lot more flops. So generally speaking, like when she 3-bets there, I don't call queen 8 offsuit normally, but in that spot, again, just kind of my pre-game strategy against her, I had already thought that that's what I would be doing. So I did. And then, yeah, on the flop, it was like, based on what I had seen of her play, right? She c-bets at a pretty high frequency. So I'm always going to just attack somebody who I feel like is c-betting maybe too much. And I also had some backdoor potential with my hand. I believe with the 8, there was like a backdoor straight possibility and a backdoor flush possibility as well. So I think that's kind of why I decided to take the aggressive stance in that hand. And then on the turn, I think I turned additional equity. And, once again, there was a lot of things about her body language. There was a lot of things about just her overall demeanor in that hand that made me feel like she was quite weak. And I also didn't think that it was like a reverse tell because, again, I think when somebody is a little bit more inexperienced, I think that it's tough for them to be able to do all of the other meta game things in that moment because they're already just so focused because of the pressure that's being put on them. So yeah, just things that she was giving off that made me feel like she was weak in the hand. So that's why I continued to barrel. And I think that was just like again, there was a little bit of strategy that I had devised going into my headset match, and I felt like very comfortable that I could implement and execute that based on what I've seen from her and based on how she was playing against me.
Well, the online poker players have a way of saying this that is a little bit less formal, which is basically you believe that you could take her to the streets, and that was your plan. And play a little street poker with her, play some queen eight offsuit versus three bets.
For
Um,
sure.
I mean, I like there are definitely things that were just obviously not reverse tells. Like was like laughing like after you three better, and in an obvious nervous laughter. I thought that was like if there's any kind of like tell that's this kind well, it's often about like tells where people give away that aren't when they're not really like paying like a lot of attention to their behavior quite reliable. But that one was like really a giveaway. It's just really hard to like. I just think people just aren't going to laugh like that with the nuts. It's pretty rare. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but they're usually the weirdos. Um, yeah, I mean, all that made sense to me. I was just curious about that particular hand, but apparently you did. You did take her to the streets. Some street poker gets me a bit more excited than watching
For
people play
sure.
boring ass style. But yes, congrats on your victory. Congrats on taking down my alter ego and being very political about it. And I mean, you could have also talked a little bit of shit, but I'll take all the compliments too. That's nice. Uh,
Yeah,
I
it's
like
hard to talk
compliments. I like
shit,
a little
Jungle.
fire too.
It's hard to talk
No,
shit,
no, no.
like
Don't.
that day I came out as the winner, but definitely if we played that heads up match 100 times, like you're going to beat me more than I'm going to beat you. And that's just a fact. But like I think that's the thing that people need to remember is that there's so much ego and so much bravado in poker. Everybody always just wants to feel like they're the absolute best. And for me, it's like if I continue to know that there's more things I can learn about the game, that's how I'm going to get better. And that's how I'm going to continue to level up. Saying that you're at the top doesn't make you at the top. Thinking that you're at the top doesn't make you at the top. Like you got to put in the work. And putting in the work sometimes means playing against players that are better than you. But like I said, I feel like, I'm very honest about my skill set and my game, especially compared to other people. So, if I thought I was better than you at Heads Up Jungle, I would definitely say so.
Probably battling me at like 200, 400 too, trying to get my money. I mean, that's one thing. Um, yeah, I mean, it should be inversely correlated with how much you might say that you're the best compared to, it should be, yeah, definitely negatively correlated because, like if people were saying it all the time for you, you wouldn't have to say it. You would say it if you like if you're saying if you're trying to anchor people towards something or trying to release that like inner desire to become it rather than get the outward validation from it. Um, and yeah, I mean, definitely you're right about the mentality. You definitely like it's very important to always keep an open mind towards learning new things and go out there and try them. Actually, is a big thing as well. I want to emphasize that studying is really important too. That's actually something I should do more of for becoming really good. And yeah, that's nice little nice addendum to reminder for the other players of what they should do to become a little bit better in a nutshell. And anything else you'd like to say to all the aspiring Game of Gold champions, maybe even to get on a show, because that's a feat in of itself out there before we finish up here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people have asked me, like, oh, yeah, I want to be on the show and this, that, and the other. And I just have to say, like, just, I don't know what the casting process is going to be next time. I know for our season, they met with all of us individually. Maybe there will be some type of video submission process for the next time around because obviously a lot of people seem to be interested in being on the show. I mean, I know this is going to sound super, super trite, but just be yourself, right? I feel like they're looking for all types of people and all types of players. They are not just looking for the best of the best. They're not just looking for people who are already household names. They're definitely looking for a player who's just starting out, somebody that maybe no one's ever heard of. Like, I feel like they're really looking for diverse types of people. So just like be yourself and be authentic and honest with your story and your journey. It's not about, how much you have on your Hendon mob. It's just really about if you're a fighter, like if you're a competitor. I think all of the best people on this show were competitors at heart. You could see their competitive spirit come out. And I feel like that's the most exciting thing to watch.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's kind of like how you get on any of the show. But I want to add a little bit to that because, like, kind of, I mean, a lot of people will think, well, I am being myself and it's not working, kind of thing. I think it's really important to kind of like, how do you say, like polarize in some kind of way, or like go down, or like embrace certain like niche aspects of yourself. Like the thing of being a
Totally.
competitor and someone who is competitive and really has a lot of emotion in that area, is one such thing, and that is really good for not just TV, but actually every. I mean, it's conflict is one of some kind of conflict is necessary for any kind of show to be entertaining, any kind of cartoon or whatever it is. And I mean, there's other things too, but like if poker, the good news is that poker has a lot of guys that just aren't really doing anything, and they're just some other guy. And just even being like a woman helps a bit, just because there's so many dudes here, and a lot of them aren't really standing out much at all, because it's a lot of the game does benefit robotic kind of logic, um, to use to analyze and execute on. But if you can go beyond that robotic logic and embrace something that's a little bit more colorful, and that um, it has a more unique aspect that has some emotion attached to it, then that will gain a lot more attention. And I think that's what one way of explaining this idea of be yourself to people that are a little bit, or find that statement to be a little bit opaque. That's just my
Definitely.
interpretation.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that advice. I love the advice of just kind of like highlighting the most interesting parts of yourself and not being afraid to show parts of yourself that you might think is not, normal or like whatever. Like those are going to be the most interesting parts of yourself, right? Is the ones that maybe other people don't get to see as often.
And some people won't like it, but who cares? Those people.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say, Maria, before we go?
No, it's just good to reconnect with my nemesis. It's good to chat.
Yeah, well, it's good to have a nemesis. It's so friendly. Yeah, like a little bit of some nemesis action. But yes, thank you for your time, Maria. Until next time. You actually knocked me out in the bounty tournament in Bahamas.
I did. You
Invisible
can't escape
bounty.
me. You cannot escape me. That's it. I have your
I mean,
number
that's
forever
just
for the rest of
that's.
your days. I own
I
your
didn't.
soul. I own your soul.